The expensive wine in my glass tasted like vinegar as I sat through another excruciating monthly family dinner at Blanc, listening to my brother James brag about his latest acquisition. Another tech startup under Wellington Industries' belt, he announced, straightening his Rolex. That makes 3 this quarter. Our son is a true business genius, my father beamed while my mother nodded approvingly. I took another sip of wine, thinking about the notification I'd received just hours ago. Wellington Industries stock had dropped 40% after their latest genius acquisition turned out to be a digital house of cards. James didn't know it yet, but his company was bleeding money faster than his designer suits could hide. "And how are you doing, Olivia?" my mother asked with practiced concern. "Still working at that. What was it again?" "Software consulting," I replied quietly. What they didn't know was that my little consulting job was actually my cover as I built Morgan Technologies into a silent giant in the tech industry. While James bought failing startups for headlines, I'd spent 5 years developing revolutionary AI systems that would change the game entirely. "At least she's working," James smirked. "Though I noticed you're still taking the bus, sis. Need help with a car loan?" I glanced down at my simple dress, Chanel, though they'd never recognize it, and thought about the fleet of cars in my private garage. The bus they'd seen me on was actually my company's prototype for autonomous public transportation, which I personally tested each week. "I'm doing fine," I said. "Fine isn't exactly crushing it," my father interjected. "Your brother just closed a $100 million deal. What's your biggest project worth?" I suppressed a smile thinking about the $2.8 billion acquisition I'd finalized that morning. Morgan Technologies had just become Wellington Industries' largest shareholder through a series of shell companies. James had no idea he'd been selling controlling interests to his poor sister. "Oh, small projects here and there," I replied. My sister-in-law Victoria, dripping in new money jewelry, leaned forward. "Sweetie, James could probably find you something at Wellington. Entry-level, of course, but it's better than whatever it is you're doing." The irony almost made me laugh. In less than 24 hours, Wellington Industries would announce an emergency board meeting. Their genius acquisitions had left them vulnerable and their stock was in free fall. They needed a bailout fast. A bailout I was prepared to offer, with conditions. "Speaking of Wellington," James continued, "we're celebrating our latest success tomorrow. Major announcement at the Plaza Hotel. You should come, Olivia. See what real success looks like." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, knowing exactly what tomorrow's announcement would actually be. My phone buzzed discreetly. A message from my CFO. "Wellington's board has called an emergency meeting. Stock down another 15% in after-hours trading. They'll need the bailout by morning." "Still using that old phone?" James noticed, pulling out his latest model. "I just got the new one. Only $2,000. But I suppose that's a bit out of your budget." My old phone was actually a custom secure device that could run my entire company's operations. Cost? About $50,000. But they didn't need to know that. "It works for what I need," I said. "That's your problem, Olivia," my father sighed. "No ambition. No vision. Look at James, he thinks big, takes risks. Too bad those risks are about to bankrupt his company," I thought, but kept quiet. The waiter approached with the bill. James reached for it with his platinum card, always eager to show off. "I've got this one," he announced grandly. "Since some of us can afford it." Little did he know that I owned Blanc, along with half the high-end restaurants in the city. His generous gesture would end up in my account anyway. "Thank you, James," I said softly. "You've always been so generous with your success." He puffed up like a peacock, completely missing the irony in my voice. "Well, someone in the family has to be successful." As we stood to leave, Victoria adjusted her designer bag. "Don't forget tomorrow's announcement, Olivia. Though, maybe wear something more appropriate than your usual attire." I looked down at my simple dress again, remembering the emergency board meeting scheduled for 7 a.m. tomorrow. By the time James made his grand entrance at the plaza, Wellington Industries would already belong to Morgan Technologies. "Oh, I'll be there," I assured them. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." My father checked his watch, a gaudy piece that screamed new money. "James, don't forget to review those acquisition reports tonight. Tomorrow's announcement needs to be perfect." If only they knew what those reports really showed. While James had been buying startups for headlines, I'd been quietly acquiring his company's debt, positioning myself for this exact moment. "Don't worry, Dad," James said confidently. "Tomorrow, everyone will see exactly what a Wellington can achieve." I smiled, thinking about how right he was, just not in the way he imagined. "Yes," I agreed quietly. "Tomorrow will certainly be revealing." As they walked to their expensive cars, I headed toward the bus stop, hearing their poorly concealed laughter behind me. Let them laugh. In less than 12 hours, they'd learn that success doesn't always arrive in a luxury car. Sometimes it takes the bus. The next morning, I arrived at Wellington Industries headquarters at precisely 6:45 a.m., dressed in a custom Armani suit that cost more than James's car. The board members were already gathering in the main conference room, their faces tense with worry. My assistant Marcus met me in the private elevator. Wellington's stock dropped another 20% overnight. Their board is in panic mode. James hasn't arrived yet. Apparently, he's still preparing for his success announcement at the plaza. I smiled, thinking of the elaborate celebration my brother had planned. The champagne, the press, the self-congratulatory speech he'd probably practiced in the mirror, all about to come crashing down. "Has the bailout paperwork been prepared?" I asked. "Yes, Ms. Morgan. Morgan Technologies' offer is the only viable option they have. The terms are quite favorable to us." Favorable was an understatement. In exchange for saving Wellington Industries from bankruptcy, we would acquire complete control. James's corner office would be empty by lunch. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. These men and women had dismissed me for years, following James's lead in treating me like a failure. Now they sat up straight, suddenly recognizing the power dynamic had shifted. "Good morning," I said calmly, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Shall we discuss the future of Wellington Industries?" "Ms. Morgan," the board chairman began nervously, "we appreciate Morgan Technologies' interest, but surely there are other options." I opened my laptop, displaying Wellington's real financial status. "Your company has lost $800 million on failed acquisitions this quarter alone. Your stock has dropped 60% in 2 weeks. And your CEO," I paused for effect, "is currently preparing to announce another acquisition you can't afford." The color drained from their faces as they reviewed the numbers. "How did you know about?" One board member started. "I know everything about Wellington Industries," I cut in. "Including how my brother James has been hiding losses through creative accounting. Did you really think those tech startups were worth what he paid?" Just then my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "James just arrived downstairs. Should I let him know about the meeting?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let him prepare for his big announcement." The board members shifted uncomfortably as I distributed the bailout documents. The terms were clear. Morgan Technologies would save Wellington Industries from bankruptcy in exchange for complete control. "This is highly unusual," the chairman protested weakly. "More unusual than letting your CEO destroy the company with vanity acquisitions?" I asked quietly. Before he could respond, the door burst open. James stood there, his face red with rage, still clutching his prepared speech for the plaza announcement. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Why wasn't I informed of this meeting?" "Sit down, James," I said calmly. "We're discussing your resignation." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "My resignation? Do you know who I am?" "Better than you know yourself," I replied, standing up. "I know about the failed acquisitions you've been hiding. The inflated valuations. The mounting debt. Did you really think nobody would notice?" His confidence wavered as I pulled up more detailed reports on the screen. "These are confidential." "Nothing is confidential from your company's largest shareholder," I interrupted. "Morgan Technologies owns 40% of Wellington Industries. As of this morning, we're exercising our right to assume control." James staggered slightly, gripping the back of a chair. "Morgan Technologies? But that's my company," I finished for him. "The sister you mocked for taking the bus built a technology empire while you were buying worthless startups for headlines." The board members watched in stunned silence as James's world crumbled around him. "This is a joke," he sputtered. "Dad won't allow." "Dad's not on the board," I cut in. "And after today, neither are you." I slid the resignation papers across the table. You can sign willingly and keep a generous severance package, or we can discuss those creative accounting practices you've been using. Your choice. James's hands trembled as he reached for the documents. How long? He whispered. How long have you been planning this? I thought about all the family dinners where he'd mocked my career choices. All the times he'd flaunted his success while dismissing my potential. Long enough to watch you dig your own grave, I replied. Now, I believe you have an announcement to cancel at the plaza. As James slumped in defeat, my phone buzzed again. This time it was our father. Just heard about an emergency board meeting at Wellington. What's going on? You'll find out soon enough, I typed back. Family dinner tonight should be interesting. The board members were already signing the bailout agreement, eager to save what they could of their investments. James sat alone in the corner, his carefully prepared success speech crumpled in his hands. One more thing, I announced to the room. Morgan Technologies will be implementing immediate changes, starting with a complete audit of all recent acquisitions. James's head snapped up. You can't. I can, I interrupted. And I will. Consider it a lesson in real success, brother dear. As I gathered my things to leave, I paused by his chair. Oh, and James? I won't be needing help with that car loan after all. That evening, I arrived at Blanc precisely on time for our monthly family dinner. The maitre d', who knew exactly who owned the restaurant, gave me a knowing smile as he led me to our usual table. My parents and Victoria were already seated, their faces ashen. James's chair remained conspicuously empty. Where's James? My mother asked, her voice trembling slightly. I settled into my seat, smoothing my designer dress. No need to hide my wealth anymore. Probably still cleaning out his office. Corporate transitions can be so time-consuming. My father's hand tightened around his wine glass. What have you done? Done. I raised an eyebrow. I simply made a sound business investment. Isn't that what you always wanted? For me to think bigger. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. You destroyed him. Your own brother. No, I corrected her, signaling the sommelier. James destroyed himself. I just happened to be there to pick up the pieces. And speaking of pieces, I pulled out my phone, displaying Wellington Industries' new organizational chart. Victoria, you'll need to vacate your VP office by Friday. The position has been eliminated. You can't do this to us, my mother protested. We're family. Family. I laughed softly. Was it family when you mocked my career choices? When you dismissed my potential? When you celebrated James's hollow success while treating me like a failure? The sommelier appeared with a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982. Your personal reserve, Ms. Morgan, he said respectfully. My parents' eyes widened at the revelation that their struggling daughter had a wine collection worth millions. Now, I continued, taking a sip of the exceptional wine, let's discuss some changes in our family dynamic. My father leaned forward, his business instincts finally kicking in. Whatever James did, we can fix this. As a family. Like you fixed my reputation? I asked quietly. All those times you told people I couldn't handle corporate success? That I was finding myself, while James built his empire. I pulled out another folder. I'd learned the power of dramatic timing from watching James's showy presentations. These are the real numbers behind Wellington's acquisitions. Would you like to see how your golden child actually performed? My mother pushed away the folder, her hands shaking. Money isn't everything, Olivia. Really? I arched an eyebrow. That's not what you said last month when James bought Victoria that tennis bracelet. What were your exact words? At least one of our children understands success. Victoria touched the bracelet unconsciously. We never meant to. To what? I interrupted. To make me feel worthless? To treat me like a disappointment? To assume that taking the bus meant I was struggling? I reached into my bag and pulled out my black card, the one with no spending limit. Speaking of transportation, would you like to know what I was really doing on that bus? Testing my company's autonomous driving technology. The same technology that's now worth billions. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of pale. Billions. Morgan Technologies, I explained, enjoying their shocked expressions, is valued at $12.4 billion. Wellington Industries was actually one of our smaller acquisitions. The waiter approached to take our orders, but I waved him away. Actually, I think we're done here. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Need to restructure the company. My brother ran into the ground. As I stood to leave, my mother reached for my hand. Olivia, please. We can work this out. I gently removed her hand. Like you worked out my future? Planning my career while ignoring my potential? Oh, mother. This isn't something you can fix with a family dinner and empty apologies. What do you want from us? My father asked, his voice barely a whisper. I paused, thinking about all the years of condescension and dismissal. Nothing. I already have everything I want. Including the one thing James never had, genuine success built on real innovation, not daddy's connections. Victoria made one last attempt. The company James built. The company James destroyed, I corrected her. And the company I now own. Speaking of which, you might want to start job hunting. I hear the market's quite competitive these days. As I walked toward the exit, I heard my mother burst into tears. My father was already on his phone, probably trying to reach his business contacts, not knowing that most of them now worked for me. Marcus was waiting with my car, not the bus this time. How did it go? He asked, opening the door. Exactly as expected, I replied. Has James cleared out his office? Yes, Ms. Morgan. Though he left something for you. Marcus handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo from 10 years ago, James standing proudly in front of Wellington Industries, his arm around my shoulders. On the back he'd written, I never saw you coming. Well played, little sister. The next morning I sat in my new office, James's former corner suite, reviewing the changes we'd implement at Wellington. The company had potential, buried under layers of my brother's mismanagement. My phone buzzed with messages from family members. Mom, please let's talk about this. Dad, we can fix this as a family. Victoria, you've made your point. Now stop punishing us. I archived them all and turned to the window, watching the morning traffic below. One of my autonomous buses glided past, the same one they'd mocked me for riding.